The Locked On Podcast Network presents the NFL Big 3 in 30. The 3 biggest stories in the NFL from our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The NFL Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest story in the NFL. You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast.
I compared it to, I said it was fast guy insulation for the draft, so you don't have to feel like you have to go into the draft. Oh, we have to get a fast guy. We have to get a fast guy. But it's insulation in the way that newspaper on the Lambeau concrete when you're at a game in January is insulation. Like, it helps. You don't lose all your heat through your boots into the concrete, but it's a marginal difference. This is a help for your return game because you're not putting extra miles on Jayden Reed. You're not putting extra miles on Keyshawn Nixon, who is now a no doubt starting cornerback for you. Keyshawn Nixon even said, I kind of don't even want to do it because the rules, and he was pouting a little bit, right? But he's right in that the new rules are not friendly to returners. Now, Mecole Hardman has been known to make some boneheaded decisions on punt returns, but he is dynamic when he has the ball in his hand because he can absolutely fly. So if all this does is give the Packers Tyler Ervin 2.0, and I'm not even talking about 2020 Tyler Ervin, I'm talking about like 2019 Tyler Ervin. Fine. That's a positive signing for the Packers. They're better with Mecole Hardman. Because Jayden Reed, by the way, I love Jayden Reed, has not proven to be a dynamic returner in the NFL. Just hasn't. I like the idea of Jayden Reed punt returner, but this is not, putting Odell Beckham back there in specialty situations. Like, it's just not. Mecole Hardman has much more juice and just much more dynamic ability back there. There's also the offensive piece of this, and I wrote about this today in The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. One of the reasons why Jayden Reed, there was an account that mostly does fantasy football that tweeted Jayden Reed only getting the number of targets that he got last year is a war crime. Hyperbole, of course. One of the reasons why, though, is there were too many times last year where you're in 11 personnel, 3 receivers on the field. You send Jayden Reed in jet motion, orbit motion. You're creating uncertainty in the defense. You're making them, scramble and make sure you're getting aligned and getting everybody set. And if you're in man coverage, you got to make sure you're running with those guys. But then they're not really in the route all the time. Now, they've done a better job of using the cheat motion and, jet into jet wheel. And it's not just like when the Packers were doing it in 2020 with Tyler Ervin, it was a lot of jet motion into check down. Like, that's what Tyler Ervin was, which was fine because Tyler Ervin was not really a receiver, not really a route runner, just a guy that was out there. But what Hardman would allow you to do is you could actually have that orbit motion guy or that jet motion guy, and he's a threat because Hardman is a threat, and he's a vertical threat. And you could have Jayden Reed on the field. I've talked a lot about wanting to play Jayden Reed more on the boundary. Just see if in 12 personnel, you can have him out there. Just see. And it doesn't, you don't even always have to be getting off press. You put him in at the Z spot, which sounds, is that a bar in a show? Feels like it. That would allow you to have them both on the field at the same time. And Hardman can run some routes off that. All of a sudden you have him running those jet wheels, and defense has got to go, oh crap. It is some insulation. So you don't have to feel like, okay, if let's say Jaden Higgins is the best option, like the defensive guys fly off the board, there is that, that non-zero chance. Harbin's gone, Ezraku's gone, Grant's gone, Barron's gone, Will Johnson's gone. And you're like, man, maybe just take Jaden Higgins, which, by the way, I'm on board with. But you're not getting, yes, he's a 4-4-7 guy. Yes, he's a vertical threat. But he doesn't scare defenses the way that Christian Watson does. And certainly wouldn't early on. But Hardman gives you some of that. Some of that. So some of that insurance that on day 3, you could take a Dante Thornton, for example, from Tennessee. And even though he's not ready to be a full-time receiver for you, you could give him some snaps if you wanted. Now, I think there's reasonable questions to ask. Like, is that better than just having Bo Melton do that thing? I would say probably, frankly. And I like Bo Melton a lot, but I think we saw last year there were times when there was a little too much Bo Melton and a little too much Malik Heath on the field. This team needs to lean into its best players. It can't be that Malik Heath is getting more reps in 12 personnel than Jaden Reed. You have to get your best players on the field. And I think Hardman gives them an opportunity. And you're going to think I'm overselling this, and I get it. But it's going to give you an opportunity to use Jaden Reed more as a receiver while maintaining the gimmicks, the little gadget stuff that you want to do as Matt LaFleur, which help this offense, which make this offense go in a lot of ways. You can do that and make sure that your best receiver is still getting an opportunity to be a receiver, to win routes, to win vertically where he's awesome. That is the plus side of someone like Hardman. And again, it is some level of insulation that if you can't get a Jalen Royals, who I just think is such a great fit, if you wanted to get crazy aggressive, Jalen Noel, who's, not the right body type, a little short arms, probably a slot at the next level. But if you think Jaden Reed can play outside, maybe Jalen Noel makes sense. I doubt it, but maybe. These other guys, these big body guys, you still need the speed. And that's the thing that the Packers have to make sure that they don't go in the draft going, we have to get a speed receiver. You have someone here that can give you some of that. Remember, the Chiefs had to basically bring him back because they didn't have that. They wanted to do other stuff with Xavier Worthy, and they needed both. So this is an interesting move. It's maybe not that impactful of a move, but it's interesting. It's pretty similar to like the Sammy Watkins move in that was never really going to be, he was never going to be, in all likelihood, a real part of the offense. But every once in a while, you'd make some plays and you go, oh, that's nice. Now, Sammy Watkins was once upon a time a real receiver when the Packers signed him, but there's a defined role here for Hardman coming in. Returner, gadget, speed insurance. For basically no money, this is fine. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. New customers can get $200 in bonus bets. When your first $5 bet wins, that's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. You've got to have those 5-12 upsets all ready. Those 4-13 upsets, maybe even a 3-14 in there just to get a little spice. Are we having fun yet? And with FanDuel, they make it easy to back them with spreads, totals, and game props. The tournament games happen almost every day, so there's always something exciting to bet on. The FanDuel app is simple to use, and when I win, I get paid instantly. No waiting around. Looking at the first 4, there's a matchup of perennial tournament teams in the first 4. The Xavier Musketeers face the Texas Longhorns. Winner will get Illinois next. FanDuel likes the Muskies by 3.5 in this one. Do people say that? Do they call them that? So they do now. Visit FanDuel.com and get on the college hoops action all tournament long.
A storybook movie-like career is coming to an end for Brandon Graham.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast.
What an emotional day. Brandon Graham calling it a career after 15 years in Philadelphia. It feels like just yesterday he was drafted in the first round, and yet it feels like he's been an Eagle my entire life. I don't really know the Eagles without number 55 being out on the field. As a 27-year-old fan that, again, I grew up in the early 2000s. I remember the 2004 Super Bowl, the 2008 NFC Championship heartbreak against the Arizona Cardinals. But as a coherent Eagles fan and now analyst, growing up as a teenager, now as an adult Eagles fan in the 2010s, in the 2020s, Brandon Graham has been a part of every era of this team for me. He's almost been like a lot of our guides throughout our life as an Eagles fan, right? He's almost like the narrator of the Eagles' history over these last 15 years. And for him to be calling it a career today, seeing him get emotional, it was hard to not get emotional as well. I mean, this is one of the coolest stories in sports. This is why I love sports, is because of guys like Brandon Graham. It literally feels like a story from a movie, right? A former draft bust that for years nobody wanted in this city. He was blocking fans. He was a rotating piece of Andy Reid's defensive line. Wasn't really that great. Was nearly let go in 2014 by Chip Kelly when he was an awkward fit in that 3-4 defense where he's playing outside linebacker. To go from that guy, who the initial narrative always was, you guys remember this, they took Brandon Graham over Earl Thomas. They shouldn't have did that. Like, we heard that for years. I remember that growing up. To go from that kind of narrative to now, BG has played more games than anybody in franchise history. He has the third most sacks in Eagles history with 76 and a half. To play 206 games in Midnight Green, to be one of two core pieces all time with this team that won both Super Bowls, him and Lane Johnson. Of course, I guess you could say Rick Lovato and Jake Elliott as well, but you know what I mean. Two core pieces of the offense or defense to win both championships, and to be in 3 Super Bowls for this team, only BG and Lane Johnson can say that they've done that. To go from where BG started to where he ended, to play for 15 years with this franchise, which is rare. You don't see that a lot in modern day sports where a guy sticks with one team for a decade and a half. You literally couldn't write it any better. It's like a movie. And for him to go out on top like this, it puts a perfect bow on top of this career. Like, it perfectly ties it up, sends him off into the sunset. For him, I mean, talk about like a movie-like ending, or just a movie-like story in general. For him to not only do everything I'm talking about, and to make the biggest play in Eagles history, strip-sacking Tom Brady, but to also come back and play in Super Bowl 59, his final year, getting injured after the best game of his career, I think, maybe one of them, in LA this year on Sunday Night Football. For him to think that his farewell tour, his final championship run was cut short, and for him to make it back just in time to play in one final game and to win one more Super Bowl, to beat another all-time great quarterback, it's one of the coolest stories that you'll ever see in sports. And Brandon Graham did it the right way. He was such a good leader. On the field, off the field, vocally, lead by example. He's one of the funniest guys that you'll ever see play in the NFL. I think he's an all-time trash talker. And this wasn't a player that 6'5", 6'6", a 7-foot wingspan, can run a 4.4. He wasn't some athletic freak coming out of Michigan. He doesn't have the build of other edge rushers. But the guy had an all-time motor, an all-time work ethic, and he became one of the most efficient pass rushers of this era. And yeah, he only had one double-digit sack season, but since coming into the league, according to Pro Football Focus, Brandon Graham, first off, has the 6th highest grade of any pass rusher on the edge since PFF has been grading, since BG's been in the league. He has the 5th most pressures with 653. His 16.7% pass rush win rate is 7th since 2010. For him to do all of that with those athletic limitations, with the start of his career not going as perfectly as others, it's incredible. And it just shows what those non-measurable things can do for a player. And Brandon Graham is sending himself off into the sunset on his terms. And I love seeing athletes get the opportunity to do that. I love seeing that for Jason Kelce, for Fletcher Cox, and now for BG. And again, for him to end it in New Orleans, like I keep watching that video of him kneeling down and, getting ready for warmups before the game, and him just like smiling, looking out into the crowd and saying like, man, like we did it. To see the appreciation on his face getting back to that stage and not ending it where they did in Super Bowl 57 in Arizona, for him to be a part of this with this new core to kind of pass the torch, both, physically and metaphorically, it doesn't get any better than that. And again, he made the greatest play that we've ever seen as an Eagles fan. 2 minutes to go, only up by one score. Here comes the greatest quarterback of all time marching down the field, doing what he always does. It feels like this inevitable scenario is about to play out. Brandon Graham's strip sack, not only is it the most important play in Eagles history and it gave you your first championship, but it made me believe, like it just makes you more hopeful. Not to get too deep, but it makes you more hopeful as a human being. Like sometimes things just seem inevitable, impossible to overcome. Like the greatest quarterback of all time who had thrown for 500 yards in that game, coming back to win yet another championship, just like he did the year before when he led the greatest comeback in Super Bowl history. I remember being at the Fillmore in downtown Philadelphia, watching Brady in that scenario saying, we know how this ends. We've seen it before. They left too much time on the clock. He's going to do what he does. And when Brandon Graham, when I saw that ball fall out of Tom Brady's hands, that now has made me believe that it can turn around at any moment. Anything in life, anything in sports, all it takes is one play. All it takes is one moment that this is not scripted. Like it's not always set in one way. It's not always supposed to go this way. It can go the other way. BG's strip sack really changed my perspective on a lot of things in life. And what a perfect time to make that play, to be a legend. Because that defense hadn't stopped. They couldn't stop a nosebleed in that game. And BG stepped up. And that's where legends are made of. And I don't think anybody should ever wear number 55 again in the city of Philadelphia. In, I should say, that stadium on that field. That jersey number should be in the rafters with the likes of Brian Dawkins and Donovan McNabb and Steve Van Buren and so on and so forth. Like, I think, again, I mean, look at those numbers. The third most sacks in franchise history was 76.5. 206 games played. No Eagle has ever played more games. He broke Chuck Bednarik's record. 2 Super Bowl wins. I mean, that's as legendary as you get. If you're not going to retire his number, then you might as well stop retiring anybody's number. So, hats off to Brandon Graham. 15 incredible years. This one was definitely emotional. And I just remember 2018 seeing him walk off the field after that loss at New Orleans in the divisional round and seeing him shake hands with every member of the media and hearing the way he was talking at his press conference. We all thought that was it for him. Like, he was going to be done with the Eagles. They weren't going to re-sign him. He was going to cash in with another team. Like, we thought that was the end of BG's time in Philly. For the Eagles to get 6 more seasons out of this player and get 1 more ring and 2 more Super Bowl runs, you got to feel pretty thankful. Because I remember seeing him walk off the field in the Superdome. And how cool is it that we thought that was the moment it would end in the Superdome, and instead it ends in the same stadium, but 6 years later under the midnight green confetti. Like, talk about a movie-like ending. I just realized that as I was talking, that happened. I mean, it doesn't get any better than that. And BG was smart enough to see how perfect this career was coming to an end, and I'm glad that he retired when he did. He could still play. I think he would be a good rotating piece for this defense next year in year 16, but it's not going to get any better than this. And BG made the right call today. Tip of the cap to number 55.
March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. New customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. You've got to have those 5-12 upsets all ready. Those 4-13 upsets, maybe even a 3-14 in there just to get a little spice. Are we having fun yet? And with FanDuel, they make it easy to back them with spreads, totals, and game props. The tournament games happen almost every day, so there's always something exciting to bet on. The FanDuel app is simple to use, and when I win, I get paid instantly. No waiting around. Looking at the first 4, there's a matchup of perennial tournament teams in the first 4. The Xavier Musketeers face the Texas Longhorns. Winner will get Illinois next. FanDuel likes the Muskies by 3.5 in this one. Do people say that? Do they call them that? So they do now. Visit FanDuel.com and get on the college hoops action all tournament long.
Looking at the Vikings offseason so far, we can get a sense for how they feel about JJ McCarthy.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast.
Because JJ McCarthy didn't play his rookie year because of injury, does that qualify him for comeback player of the year if he has an insane season? Jesus, I am going to spin your question into a much larger discussion. But to answer it, yes, the parameters for comeback player of the year are ridiculous. They are so unbelievably vague. I think everything counts. Like, because Sam Darnold got votes and was a candidate, a real candidate for it, even though they specifically and expressly said that coming back from suck is not a thing. They gave it to Joe Flacco 2 years ago. They made the declaration that they're not going to do something like that again, and then it could have been Sam Darnold. It ended up being Joe Burrow, but still. But yeah, I think coming back from an injury, even if you didn't fall down from anywhere, coming back from an injury and having an insane season, I think it absolutely makes you a candidate. And I believe Joe Burrow won it the Super Bowl year. You'll have to check me on that. But he was certainly a candidate, even though he got hurt his rookie year as well. I mean, he played a little, but I feel at that point, you're splitting hairs to that. Yeah, of course he is. But I wanted to kind of spin this into a larger point that I wanted to make. So we'll pause Town Hall Tuesday, I guess, and make it. What do the Vikings think about JJ McCarthy? I kind of wanted that to be the main topic of the show. And before we get on to more questions and hot takes, and if you look at the way that the Vikings have structured all of their contracts, I think it's a really easy thing to parse. I think it becomes very clear what they're doing. They have borrowed every dollar that they can from 2026. Everything. They have spent it all ahead of time. But they've done it all on 2 or 3 year deals. So the money the 2026 money that they are spending is going to give them utility in 2026. It's all going to be players that are on the team, unless they want to start cutting guys or whatever. But there's so much of that is restructurable, and that's a really important part of this, that it's not going to be a big deal. I'll explain more in a sec. But the Vikings are essentially using 2 years worth of money at once to get as many players in as possible on 3 or more year deals, right? Jordan Mason's on a 3-year deal. Will Fries is on a 3-year deal. Even guys like Jonathan Allen, Javon Hargrave, 2-year deals, that's okay too. Those are all meant to, it feels as though the Vikings are really going hard over a 3-year window of JJ McCarthy's rookie deal. And then in the fifth JJ McCarthy year, the fourth from now, then you're going to have to pay him or 5th-year option him or have that discussion, and you're going to want a little more cap flexibility for that. But I think for 25, 26, and 27, they can be pretty freaking reckless. And even 28 and 29, they can still be pretty reckless. They just got to be ready in 2030 to start absorbing big cap hits from a QB contract, assuming that, we get all the way down there and they still want to have this QB under contract. That we got a long way before we decide that we want him to be the guy for, 5-10 more years. But whether JJ McCarthy is good or not, you want to give him that opportunity, right? So doing this, I don't even think really says, oh, they've got all this confidence in JJ McCarthy. I don't want to do that. I do think that they have a ton of confidence in JJ McCarthy. The Vikings have not been very dishonest about these kinds of things on the podium. They've been pretty forthright about the way that they feel about their players, good or bad. And they rave about him all the time. So I feel inclined to take them at their word, at least vaguely, but also they see his contract as the parameters for the Super Bowl window. The other interpretation that I have seen is that the Vikings are essentially torpedoing their 2026 cap, going all in for one season in 2025. And this kind of spins into an Aaron Rodgers thing. They're going to go all in for one season in 2025 and then tank. And because they hate JJ McCarthy and he sucks, and they're actually just going to trade him away and tank. I think that is very Madden. I think that's the kind of team building strategy a 12-year-old would come up with, and I don't really respect it. Think about it for 2 seconds, it immediately falls apart. For one, the 2026 cap, they will have a red number on over the cap. Don't be alarmed by it. It's scary looking, but it's only scary looking. Okay, it's all bark, no bite. The Vikings have basically most of their commitments are either in that year are either in base salary or guaranteed salary, both of which can be restructured. So they can take as much of that money as they want and move it down the road. spread it all out into void years, do all kinds of stuff, and essentially restart the journey that Rick Spielman was on, which, I mean, he started doing that stuff in 2015, and the Vikings didn't really have like a true killer cap crunch where they had to cut players that, you know, weren't necessarily underperforming until COVID like ruined the salary cap in 2021 and they had to like be 1-year deal Andes. So that 2026 number is unbelievably flexible and is going to be totally effortless to get out from under that. They're going to be able to put this together for 2027 if they want to, or I don't know, maybe they all just want to like throw their hands in and give up. But I don't really think that they think that way. And I don't really respect you if you think that way. Let's go back to quitters never win. Let's go back to the questions. Sly asks, if last year was the get Darnold paid year, what's this year's theme? Great call on the last year goal, by the way. We can say it was a definite item success. Well, thank you, Sly. Yeah, it was definitely a success. Get Sam paid, dude got $100 million. Although the contract structure is weird. There's definitely like a big out after 1 year. So the Seahawks are kind of tempt to hire on Sam Darnold. But either way, he still makes, 30 mil on that in a year. We're doing great. The goal in 2025 is a Super Bowl. I mean, they're setting it up to be, this is the Super Bowl run. They wanted Joe Burrow 2021 Bengals this. Second-year quarterback coming off an injury. Lots of great stuff going on around him. Put him in the right situation and make a run. And that's going to be the goal now for the next 3 years. 25, 26, 27, here's your window. And then you got to pay JJ McCarthy. And if you want to continue the window, he has to be up to a certain level. And you have to, start figuring out your money. Those are all conversations we can have then. We don't have to do that right now. We're in a 3-year quarterback rookie contract thing, and let's surround him with as much veteran talent as we can. Sammy asks, why didn't the Vikings bring back Cam Akers as RB2? And after the Mason trade, what are the chances we trade for him a 3rd straight year? I'll never say 0, but probably not. I don't think Cam Akers would be unwelcome in this room still. I don't know. I don't think he got signed as of this recording. Yeah, there's nothing yet as of this recording. You usually bring 4 or 5 guys into camp, so it's certainly still a possibility, but he probably is going to want to go somewhere where he has a better opportunity to get snaps. I think because they think Jordan Mason is better, and I'm pretty inclined to agree. Broccoli the Pug asks, by the way, I'm going to do a Patreon video on Jordan Mason. Sooner rather than later. I think he might actually be next. I just released one on Will Fries and Ryan Kelly, patreon.com/LukeBrownNFL. If you want to see a tape breakdown of those guys, my Patreon is less than $4 a month and you get a whole bunch of stuff. Also, a lot of these videos will be made free sometime in the future. So if you don't want to pay, you're welcome to wait. Broccoli the Pug asks, I know Will Reichard was a draft pick last year and I personally love him. Is there any chance we have a kicker battle this offseason? I am like a very absolutist about like always kicker battle. Bring in an undrafted rookie, bring in some random veteran, give him someone to beat, keep him on his toes. I think it's just healthy to do, but obviously you have to know the mindset and the brain of your kicker. It's such a mental thing. If that's the kind of thing that would wreck him, like it's up to your special teams coordinator, your Nate Kading kicking coach kind of guy, to understand what that'll do to him. But assuming he's not the kind of guy that would respond poorly to that, then I think it's always worth it because it's basically free. And hey, what if he wins the competition and you upgrade at kicker for free? We can all be interested in that, right?